Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our conversation today. We're just going to give everybody a couple minutes to filter into the chat. Zoom just kind of takes a second to let everybody in here, but it's awesome to see everybody filtering in. In the meantime, if you want to, please feel free to leave where you're dialing in from in the chat, city, state, country. It's always great to see kind of where people are coming from, as well as the familiar faces from some of our past webinars. Oregon. Nice. Boston. All right, another Boston person. Maryland. And now I'm always looking for like Deb and her commentary on our webinars now, because she does a lot of energy and I love it.
She shows up, but she's definitely does a fractional ones, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
she'll make this one.
Dwitty is also me too. Also looking for Deb. Let's see if she's on here. Central Jersey. Hey, Steven.
She will love we name dropped her, so we'll have to
Yeah.
message her.
Yeah. She was actually on our webinar last week too about finding a job in HR. So that was great. A lot of energy. I saw the chat. I was like, who is this person? I was like, oh, okay, it's Deb. Iowa, awesome. I'm a big Dan Gable fan. Monterey, California, beautiful. Actually, I have a sweater from Monterey. Um, South Carolina. Hey, everybody. Amazing. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. And please, throughout this conversation, we love to make these interactive. Feel free to drop your questions, your answers, your insights into the chat. The only thing that I'll ask folks on holding off on is dropping your LinkedIn URL into the chat. We're actually going to have a dedicated networking session about 25, 30 minutes into this, where you'll get a chance to drop your URL and connect with other people who are interested in this topic, which I think will be great, because this is actually like a fairly specific topic. So if you're on the phone today, we're here to talk about something that often gets labeled kind of as a perk, but has a very real impact when done correctly. And that's recognition, employee recognition, and specifically how recognition affects retention, your employer brand, your business performance. And specifically, we're going to talk about retention for frontline teams, which I think is going to be a really interesting topic. And if you're not specifically managing frontline teams, I think there'll be a lot that's relevant for you here as well. But really, that's where we're going to dive into today. I'm joined by two amazing panelists. I'm going to do a quick introduction on myself before I jump into the two folks on here with me. So if we haven't met previously, my name is Phil Struzula. I run a company called Select Software Reviews. Our mission is to help HR professionals find and buy the right HR technology. That could be an employee recognition suite. It could be an HRIS, an applicant tracking system, et cetera. And what we have that's pretty unique is a team of advisors that you can talk to one-on-one to get bespoke advice for your company, and it's totally free. I'll talk a little bit about that later on in the session in case anybody's interested. We also have a gift card or giveaway later in the session that I think will be pretty interesting as well. With me are two amazing people. So Tracy Spangenberg. Tracy's a fractional HR executive with 25 years of HR leadership experience, with a focus on aligning people strategy with business strategy, and specifically in industries related to deskless workers. Kwesi Thomas is an exceptional HR advisor and brings 10 years of broad experience in global technology companies, including BlackBerry, Shopify, and TradeGecko. He's got a proven success record in implementing and managing traditional and unique programs and projects in human resources, finance, operations, and events. Thank you both so much for joining me today. I want to do a couple of quick notes here. One is this session is being recorded. It's going to be sent to you. This session is approved for 1 SHRM or HRCI credit. And again, we'd love to make this an engaging session. Feel free to light up the chat with your answers, your insights. We'll have a dedicated time for LinkedIn URLs in about 25 or 30 minutes. And as we get started, I just want to launch a quick poll to get a sense for where people are at with this topic so that we can tailor the conversation. We always want to obviously talk about what people care about. And as you're answering that poll, I'll just give you a really quick agenda here. And the way that I like to kind of frame this is what are you going to get out of this next 55 minutes and spending this with us? First, you're going to get expert insight. We're going to talk about what good employee recognition looks like, why businesses should care about recognition. Again, tying that business to the practice, pitfalls to avoid, providing the impact of recognition initiatives, and how to get buy-in from leadership, which is always, I think, a very common topic when we talk to HR professionals who are thinking about how do we roll out this sort of project. From a perk perspective, networking is awesome. I was on the phone yesterday with somebody who actually is getting a new job because of a webinar that we did 6 weeks ago. So that's amazing. It's a great opportunity to connect with like-minded people who are also interested in this topic. HR, CI, and SHRM credits, always a good thing. We're going to have a takeaways ebook that we'll send to everybody that's going to have the resources that we talk about here, connections in the chat, recording, and then I'll talk about this $50 gift card offer later in the session. So with all that, I would love to just sort of start this conversation off and talk about why is frontline employee recognition important to business success? Because I think whenever we want to evangelize something internally, we want to get the budget, the juice to get it done. Let's tie it back to the business. And I'll just kind of throw it out there for either of y'all to take a stab at.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I know I don't usually start, but hello everyone, and thanks for having me, Phil. And I'm thrilled to be here with Quasi. And we don't talk enough about our frontline people, but they are the most important people in your company. You can say, okay, it's a CEO, it's whomever, it's your frontline people, the people that are face to face with customers every day, the people that are face to face with, moving products from one place to another. Nothing gets done without your frontline people. And I love having conversations like this because we need to spend a lot more time about talking about how to recognize and how to give them the support that they deserve.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to be here as well. And I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of times recognizing the topic of recognition in particular, it's not easier to do sometimes with the people that are at a desk because technology makes it easy. And so sometimes I think we ignore the harder challenge, which is figuring out how to recognize the people who are in front of customers. And quite frankly, like really are the representation of the brand or the business to the world. And so I think this is recognizing or making sure that we've connect with our frontline employees is probably one of the most important things we can do in terms of connecting with them.
What do you think is unique about recognizing frontline employees versus?
We lost Phil for a second there.
We lost Phil, so we can talk about this if he jumps in. You gotta love a tech glitch once in a while, but
sorry guys.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and repeat
my
yourself.
internet connection is unstable, but I'm curious what do you think is different or important about recognizing frontline employees versus corporate employees?
Yeah, do you want to go ahead, Gracie, and I'll jump?
Sure. What's different? I think there's a couple of things. I think when we're talking about frontline, let's start with the easy one. Access to technology is often different for frontline than it is for people who are at a desk, right? So you can interact quickly through email, Teams, Slack, whatever it is, some recognition with your people who are at a desk versus those who are not, where access to technology while they're on the front line is often challenged, right? And so that's one major difference. The other one is that often we want them up and active interacting with something, whether that's moving up, building something, moving something, interacting with someone. And so that ability for them to stop and have that recognition interaction is a little bit different. Yeah, those two things probably jump off the table to me.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that. And I think unless you're kind of co-located, everybody's in one spot and you have your frontline folks moving back and forth. They're also the least connected to the corporate office. So, physically, they may not have also access to email, like to your point about technology, right? And so there also, somebody pointed out in the chat that they tend to be the most entry level with the pay. And they also tend to have the highest amount of turnover. So their motivations for working may be a little bit different than your corporate employees who want to climb that proverbial ladder, right? They may have different motivations. I think really everybody has different motivations. Right? So you can't recognize people in the same way. You can't actually recognize two individuals in the same job in the same way, because we've moved into an era where that just doesn't work. People want to feel seen and heard, valued for who they are and their contributions. And whether you're frontline or not, that looks different depending on who you are.
And I guess, I'm sort of in this headspace of these recognition programs are happening within a platform. And maybe that's the way that you both would think about it as well versus general recognition, like in the office or, at a location. And so the assumption I'm making is that from a tech perspective, this is a mobile first experience, and that's probably part of this. But what else is different about this kind of persona or demographic? Like, what are the things that maybe they care about more versus somebody who is climbing that corporate ladder?
I mean, everybody cares about money. So, that's a good thing. If you're talking about like a mobile enabled, or if you're talking about an electronic solution, I think you have to make it easy, and I think you should make it easy for everyone. But I'm a huge fan of designing for the hardest person to reach and then personalizing it from there. So somebody pointed out in the chat, everybody's got phones, and that's true. So something that's mobile enabled, something ideally that's peer to peer, that builds trust. People trust their peers sometimes, often more than their managers. So designing it around systems that they feel comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I find I want probably one of the biggest challenges is that assumption that it is that they have access to the tech stack. So some of the with some of the Gusto clients, I get to work with their HR people who have frontline employees quite often. And in doing some of the visits to, like, I'll say one of the examples, there's a hospital, there's a company that services hospitals. They have the cleaning staff in the hospital. So when I actually went out to the hospitals with them, realizing how much of a challenge it was for them to get to the technology was a bit of an aha, because some of those employees were English for second language, for example, or they were just not comfortable with as much of the phone usage as we would expect them to be. And so for some of that, I'll, no shameless plug here on the Gusto side, but like we had to build some functionality there to allow for printing and handing out recognition as well. Because for some of the frontline, it just didn't work no matter how much we tried to make the tech work. They needed to still go analog or old school in some
Mm-hmm.
cases, not every case. Of course, we want more of that in the system, but we've had to allow for some of that because not everyone can get to the tech stack the way we kind of assume so from the corporate office. And for me, that aha was really getting out there and sitting in some of the factories or hospitals and working with some people. I think it was pretty embarrassing. Sorry, one last quick story. I'll stop really quickly. We were in a meeting and trying to like we were attending the hospital's team meeting. They were giving out recognition, and the person couldn't like the person who received it just couldn't figure out how to do it on their phone. So what should have been a really cool moment turned into a 10-minute like what the heck, this isn't working moment, right?
Yeah, and you're figuring out, like, meeting people where they're at, right? That's all
Yeah.
about. So if I'm a non-English speaker and I'm in a company that where, people are personalizing recognition to me in a language that I don't speak, that's pretty awful.
Yeah.
And not no but like not going to feel great about that because I'm not going to understand that. And so I think we didn't have the tools for a long time, or we didn't have easy tools, I should say. And now with
Yeah.
AI, we can make that easier. So I'm a huge fan of meeting people where they're at in a way and in a language that they need to be communicated with. And, we can do that now.
Yeah.
One of the questions that we got from RSVPs were around related to this inclusivity topic, specifically for Gen Z. And are there things that they respond to better, or there are ways of recognizing them that are more impactful versus maybe the generations that we're part of?
And let's
The
go
old
first.
generation, the old generation. I hate sectioning people by generations, but I do it all the time anyway, because I have three Gen Z kids and I'm Gen X. And I think it's not just generally generational, but it's also by, your personality type. And I would go beyond generations and go down to the individual. We know a lot of things about Gen Z that they, are going to advocate for what they believe in. They're going to, they're more likely to stay at a position less than like I am, for example, because they're experts at building portfolio careers and they have a lot to teach us. So, but for example, I'm a deep introvert, I'm autistic. And so, how I want to receive recognition is not walking into a surprise, you got an award session with everybody clapping for me, which has happened and was horrible for me. That's not, I want a nice email or a nice thank you and something quiet and then go away. And I think it speaks to getting to know our people and getting to know our managers and how they want to receive information. Everybody likes a little gift, everybody likes a thank you, but how do we take it from there?
Yeah, I think the frequency at which recognition is expected is also increased. I agree with you. I hate using the generations, but let's just use the generations for that as well. And so I think what we're seeing often is what used to be your sort of like 5, 10, 25 year type, just milestone type recognition is happening much more frequently. So those years of like 1, 2, 3, 4, though there may not be any monetary award in those milestones or those recognize those milestones, we're seeing a lot more people put in recognition in year 1, 2, 3, 4 of those milestones because that generation is expecting they don't want to wait till 5 years or 10 years to get the watch or whatever else that we did before. And so I think the frequency that recognition is happening has also picked up. And for me, what I'm loving is the valuing of non-monetary recognition is also picked up with that generation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that brings up an important point. Those age old, hey, this person's been here for 50 years or 25 years. Those those years of service milestones are meaningful to people with a lot of years of service, but that's changing. That whole way we recognize people for their contributions is completely changing.
Yeah. We're starting to do some milestone recognition in onboarding phase these days. Like, congratulations, you've made, and for frontline, if we talk frontline specific,
Yeah.
if you asked if I was just helping design a program for your frontline team, I'd like put in onboarding recognition, like across
Love
your
it.
probation or month 9 or whatever else, put it in.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
lost why, but yeah.
Oh, I love that. Congratulations on month 6. That's like great job. That's awesome.
You guys have talked a little bit about sort of personalizing the rewards for an individual, and it seems like probably a decent amount of that falls onto the local manager. Do you have any advice for how do you train people? How do you get them to think through this lens of individuals from a manager perspective to make these programs successful?
I think everything starts and ends with the manager. People will stay or they'll leave a manager. That age old thing well, now people leave companies, right? But that individual manager is so important. They also tend to be the least trained and have access to the least amount of learning, whether that's through time or whether that's through whatever, right? And so I'll give you an example. I have a client who we were working on her people strategy. We did a full day session a couple of months ago, and she has big goals. I have big ideas that we're trying to work together, but we're doing nothing until we fix the manager training and learning and development. We're putting everything on hold until there's a good system for those folks to learn. And that depends on your company, right? Sometimes you have monthly meetings. Sometimes everybody gets on Zoom once in a while. Sometimes, and it doesn't have to be long and drawn out and bringing everybody into a physical location, but there has to be some learning that takes place and there has to be reinforcement in some sort of way so that sticks. Because if you teach them and then you just say goodbye to that piece of information, if it doesn't stick, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I would agree. For recognition specifically, I think of this as a muscle or a you've got to train this like recognition muscle for managers. It's not something they
Yeah.
inherently walk in when you promoted them from an IC to a manager. And I think for a lot of what is good in a lot of these tools is you can use the tools to force this muscle to be used often. And so the more you can leverage the processes, tools, even some of just the cadences in the company, like you're in management meetings, put recognition as an agenda in your leadership meetings, your manager meetings, like you're training a muscle. And once they've got that muscle going, then it starts to really, I think, propagate through the culture. It's funny. I got in trouble sometimes for saying when people come to me and say, "Hey, I want a peer-to-peer program," I go, "How's your manager to employee program?" Because if it's not killing it, we're just going to put in a peer-to-peer and then rip it out because you've got to get this muscle trained in the culture of the company. And a lot of times, most times that's successful through the managers, and then you can build on the other ones. But um, manager training on how to do it and then train the muscle to do it often is key.
And start with the top, start with the executive team. If your executive team is not recognizing their team members or the broader team, then any effort to work with the managers will fail. And that goes for anything, but we better make sure the CEO's giving some recognition.
Yeah.
Shawson just put something interesting in the chat about a report that they'd done on a weekly basis. And I'm wondering, like, how do you know if a manager is doing well or not, right? Like, is it something in one of these tools where it's a frequency of recognition, or like, how do I kind of keep pulse on this in a scalable way across lots of locations, lots of different employees?
I think there's probably two metrics that get looked at often. Participation, like are they in there doing the thing? And if they have a budget, how they're spending it, if they're spending their budget. And to me, for those two reports and sort of highlighting where people are doing really well and really badly on those reports is important. And that can be done. Again, most of the platforms will help you do it, but I'm kind of unashamed of like putting reports out to their team leaders about how their teams are doing with leaders boards on the good and the bad, and again, just kind of train that muscle. For me, these are all parts of that same activity, but those two metrics, participation, are they doing the thing? And are they spending their budget if they have a budget?
I think pulse surveys are great for this too. So you can ask something simple like,
Yeah.
were you recognized by your manager in the past week? What form did that take? Something like that. And you can gather data over time, and then you can, section that out by manager and really find out who's doing the work. Because if something's important to you as a company, and say you make an effort to be better at recognizing people, if there's somebody who's not doing it, that's going to come out.
Yeah.
Awesome. I want to get into this topic that we talked about a little bit around how do we get executive level buy-in. But before we get into that, I just wanted to take a quick break and talk a little bit about the work that we do at Select Software Reviews. And I know a lot of people in the chat said nice things about our webinars. It's awesome to see people come back to these again and again and again. You're probably familiar with our advisor program at this point, but the main thing that we do at SSR is we help companies find and buy the right HR tools. And so as an HR professional, you can talk to one of our advisors. It's 100% free. It's a quick call. They'll understand your business and they'll match you with the right vendors. So if you're looking for an HRIS, an ATS, a PEO, EOR, whatever the case may be, and then you basically have a concierge to help you with pricing, stakeholder management, etc. We're rated 4.9 stars out of 5. Lots and lots of great testimonials, including from Tracy. And to give you a sense for, what are some of the organizations that we're helping. We helped MIT find a new applicant tracking system. We helped fragrance.com with a new HCM. Chip City, I actually wasn't familiar with Chip City. Our team kind of went crazy for that one. I guess it's like a big cookie franchise that's all over the place. Indianapolis Colts, etc. And so, if you're a couple case studies, SMB looking for your first ATS, we had a company that literally searched for 4 months. They couldn't find the right one. They bought one within 8 days of talking to one of our advisors. A lot of teams come to us, they're sick of their existing system. I won't, call out the names of these systems that we all kind of have grown to hate, but I think you know who the culprits are. And then we also have folks that are maybe fractional who are coming to us and saying, hey, I've got a client that needs help, etc. And we're more than happy to help them as well. And as mentioned, we kind of have this special offer where if you're looking for HR technology right now, you want to book a call with one of our advisors, I'll put a link in the chat, actually. You can book directly. But basically, if you're in the US and we can help you out, then we'll buy your team coffee, which basically means we'll give you a gift card and you can do whatever you want with it. We recommend staying caffeinated. You want to take your friend out for wine or whatever, you can go crazy on that as well. And then I know there are always fractional folks here on the phone as well. And so we do have a referral program for our advisors. If you want to join our referral program, I think there's a couple hundred folks that help us kind of evangelize this offering. So yeah, if you're looking for HR software, we'd love to help you. And if somebody in your community is, please help us spread the word. Back to our normally scheduled program. We'll get into the conversation here, and then in that networking will come up in about 10 or so minutes, where we can all kind of share our LinkedIn URLs, because I know folks are interested to do that. But I would love to chat about what are the kind of specific tactics that we can use to get the C-level executives to buy into, hey, we need to put more structure around this. We need to measure recognition, and we basically just need to put more onus on this initiative.
Tracy,
Go
go
ahead,
first.
Gracie. And you go ahead.
This is a hard question. I get it often because this is often the hardest part of recognition is
Yeah.
getting buy-in and budget. So I mean, there are ROI calculators and reports that are out there to help you build the case. There's a couple of things that I think are sort of not out there and that you can easily find is recognition is likely happening in your company already, and it's probably off the books and being done incorrectly or non-reported. And if you can figure out where that is and how much that is, you can often make the case that you're pulling that in. And so that's a bit of a way to find some of it, especially if it's happening in a large way somewhere, kind of uncontrolled or unchecked. That is definitely one. The other is for some of the, I'll speak it for Gusto in particular. For some of these platforms, you can start with like sort of this crawl, walk, run approach where you don't have to go on day one and put all 40,000 or 4,000 or 400 employees on a platform and pay for every user. So you can sometimes put a smaller cohort of people who are just giving recognition for a much lower cost and start building the case out. If you're going to do that, that does work. You got to have some budget. You can have no budget. Those often don't work, to be very frank with you. And for the leaders, they're doing this. Like often they're the ones who know the theory. They know what recognition does for their people. They just need the framework and to get behind it. So often for me, I found at least a couple allies in the leadership team on the C-suite that are in there and they're ready for recognition. You just got to figure out who they are and how to build that case together.
Yes. Yes to all of that. And I think with anything I do, almost anything I do, the biggest question I get is how do I convince my CEO? And my sarcastic but very true answer is always you shouldn't have to make a business case for doing the right thing, / in this case, recognizing people, but you do. And so I think all of those things and tying it to the business. I think a few people have mentioned core values and how does it make sense for the business? What is something that your CEO, your CFO, anybody greenlighting that money spend is going to receive? Tell a story of that recognition that's already happening that's positive, because it could be happening and it could be positive or negative. So tell a story of the impact. And then tie that to, lack of recognition and what the potential outcomes, like Kwesi said, the calculators are out there that you can find, what happens if we do nothing? Where our turnover is 112%, and we anticipate that if we have a recognition program, it's going to go down to 75. If we do nothing, it's going to go up to 140. So you can kind of map that out with analytics, and those kinds of tactics tend to go pretty well.
We are seeing a lot more case studies being put out by the recognition platforms like ourselves, where we're putting out case studies of similar companies And those are often, I found them often helpful in adding those to our presentation to our leaders. Here's a similar
Yeah.
company doing this, and here's their case study of how it worked for
Yeah.
them.
Or if you know your CEO or CFO is a big fan of somebody who's loosely in the space and has written about that, send them an article. That can be helpful too.
It seems like probably the biggest lever from like a spreadsheet perspective is retention. And hey, if we can get that person who used to stay for 9 months to 12 months or 18 months, like the productivity gains as well as the lack of you know, hiring costs and onboarding and all these things are probably pretty dramatic. And I would imagine that like if you can just incrementally increase that retention, you're probably going to see some pretty unbelievable ROI. I'm wondering, you know, it's very intuitive, I think, for some people that doing these programs does have an impact on retention as well as employer brand. I'm wondering if what you guys have seen and maybe how that plays into this whole discussion around business alignment and buy-in from C-level folks.
Yeah, just an example that comes to mind. There's a client. They've got about 80,000 employees. I'd say of the 80,000, 75,000 are frontline, so they're heavily frontline. And so their recognition programs have been going for about 3-ish years now. And their data team has correlated the data of recognition and their retention. And so they've come back and said, hey, those who receive recognition are twice as likely to stay with the company than those who are not. And so that's their data on their end. And so they've almost, I would say they doubled down. They've probably almost tripled down in their recognition space, carving out frontline specifically as its own budget and kind of going, hey, office, don't eat up this budget. This is frontline money, because they're finding that they're getting a return on people staying. And then, of course, all the other things, reduction in turnover costs, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of it, if nobody cares that you're there, why should you care, right? And so some simple things can make a big difference. Full disclosure, I left the corporate world about 16, almost 17 months ago. But what we had in my past company, and this actually worked really well, we had our strategic goals, our company strategic goals. There was always usually a couple of people focused goals. And so one of them for a 3-year strategic period toward the end of my tenure there was around retention, not turnover, but retention, and improving that retention, and specifically improving that retention for our frontline folks. And there were lots and lots of things tied to that. One of the biggest things was a multi-phased recognition program. That this was actually not an app. It was not a piece of software, because at that time it wasn't something, it's something we looked into, but we couldn't find the solution for us. So we created our own thing. So it was tied to our core values. So there was a different recognition program for each letter of the core values. And so there was a little bit of something for everyone. And I think toward the end of my time there, that was getting time to revisit that, because you have to be always innovating, or you have to be always improving, or it will lose its effectiveness if it's not changing in some sort of way. But we were able to see decreases in turnover, or I should say increases in retention, meeting our goals. We were able to increase recruitment of the different areas that we were recruiting in. And that was, retention was only part of it, but it was recognition was only part of it, but it was a really big part.
Do you remember like what the kind of ballpark increase in retention was?
It was incremental, and it was, there's always going to be some turnover, but we were trying to keep retention to about 85%. And so we were talking just about maybe a 5%. So it wasn't a huge lift. So, but again, it was a really good, the company was a good culture, right? So we were starting from a good place, and we were trying not to get worse. And that looks a lot different. I think one of the things we have to be careful of when we talk about, recognition programs is, it's a solution. It's a great solution, but if your culture is awful, it's not going to fix it. So you're talking about many things that go into that. And so in that particular company, we were starting from a really good place. But if you're not, I think there's a lot of work that has to be done before you even think about a recognition program.
Yeah. I would agree with that. If your
Um,
culture's crap, your culture's crap. You have to fix that.
Exactly. Right. Right. And
Yeah.
a lot of, a lot of people don't necessarily want to do that because that's a lot different of a conversation.
Yeah.
do you have any opinions on peer versus manager recognition?
I do, but I'm changing it based on something that you said, Gracie. You said, like, tell me more about that. So you said something like peer to peer isn't as effective, or something like that. I want to hear more
So,
about that.
I have strong opinions on it. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
equally held
No,
to
I love
strong
it.
opinion. To me, this is about building a culture and building, and it's called a recognition culture. And so, to me, the hardest part of that journey is getting people to get into a platform, like getting people to get into a platform, log in, find the person, do all the stuff they have to do in a platform or whatever to give peer-to-peer recognition, which is often non-monetary for the most part, most of the programs. So you want me to do a lot of work to say thank you. And I can do that in Slack, Teams, da 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 da. Like I can do that already. And so to me, peer-to-peer is only when it's built on a platform of we're already doing this activity at a healthy clip for other reasons. And that usually is because the managers, so I layer this in. You've got a milestone program, which puts me in there at least once a year. I've got managers recognizing people on often that puts me in there again. I've got team recognition happening because managers are recognizing the team's effort for the month, puts me in there again. I've got leaders, like senior leaders recognizing, puts me in there again. And so I've got this moving organism of a culture that's going, recognition is important to me. And then when you land for that peer-to-peer piece, it works. But if you just ask, your X number of employees to hop into another login and do something for free that they could do in other platforms, it's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Behind that, like if you're going to do peer-to-peer, to me, it's got to be based on solid manager recognition, but also some sort of budget behind incentivizing and keeping that culture fresh of doing peer-to-peer. And so, whether that's through draws or whether that's through calling them out in dashboards and places. But for me, I've with helping the Gusto clients on their programs, peer-to-peer is often people come and show up for. And and we're talking them back from, hey, that's going to be, how do you go into your leadership meeting? Sorry, I'm rambling. Well, how do you go into a leadership meeting?
Love it.
Say there's like, you've got 7% participation rate and you can make all your efforts. Oh, great, we moved to 9. And they're going 9%, right? And so for me, I want to build a solid manager program so I can say peer-to-peer is at 30% plus 40. Anybody who tells you that 80% on peer-to-peer, I would love to see what they're doing. But that's my take, is you've really got to build a culture and not just layer in a program.
I love that. I love that. And I think peers are really effective, that people will trust their peers more than anyone, but maybe I'm thinking now that maybe they're more effective in championing a program than actually jumping right into a peer program. I want to jump in and clarify something I said. Somebody said, well, isn't recognition part of a culture? Yes. And I said, don't even think about it before fixing your culture. I mean, starting to address that, because culture change takes like 5 to 7 years. It's a long thing. But if you think a recognition program will fix your culture, it won't. It'll help. It'll add to it, but it's not the only solution.
Are there companies that you guys look up to? Like I remember studying DaVita, which I think has like a very famous like awards ceremony for the super tough job of helping people through dialysis and recognizing folks in a way that Tracy would hate, on stage in front of a few thousand people and telecast to, probably 50,000 more. Are there companies that you all look up to or case studies that are interesting to learn about, maybe a podcast episode that would be worth listening to?
I'll have to get back to you on that. So I know that there are, and I think most of them tend to be fly under the radar, but I think we can learn a lot from some of the big ones. But I think Quasi would have more of a offhand knowledge of that.
Case studies and webinars a little harder to find. There are a couple. Compass One Healthcare does a fantastic job. They have but they have dedicated recognition staff in their Total Rewards team. There's a team of 2, and they put a lot of effort on, I would call it, layering in recognition. So there's all the platform stuff, but there's still the offline recognition that they help their leaders with, and they also do the Night of the Stars type of thing at the end of the year. So, but they've got sort of the layers of recognition happening. There are some smaller companies. I say smaller, they're still decent size. There's a company called Live Casino down in the States, and they have ripped out their recognition. Sorry, they've ripped out their time and attendance program, which is about 1-2% of their payroll in paying people for showing up on time in frontline, and dumped it all into recognition. And their early case studies that they've done so far have been fantastic. They show that they were better off doing recognition than they were paying people for frontline for showing up on time and not missing days of works and having penalties and things like that. So there are quite a few, but I would say within the reward space, this is an area that doesn't have a lot of airtime in terms of this type of conversation, right?
Yeah, I agree. One last question before we get into the networking. What are the key pitfalls to avoid? The broken culture seems like kind of the number one. What else have you all seen that is important to keep in mind as you look to strategize and roll out one of these programs?
I think doing a lot. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, doing a lot of listening and getting. I'm a big fan of this with anything, no matter what it is. Get people from all different areas of your company involved. If you're designing something, and design it not necessarily just for, but with. And so getting input before you make a decision on something that you're going to go with, particularly if you have a large frontline workforce, getting those some group of those folks together to listen to see what might be effective, because the worst thing is to launch something that you think is fantastic and then it falls flat and nobody uses it and you've spent a bunch of money on it.
Yeah, I would say there's a few things along that sort of launch journey. I said, for me, number one, make sure you've got enough resources to not just launch the program, but to actually ride through the change management and the adoption of the program for the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And so the resources aren't just there for hey, big announcement, big email, big whatever, and then we'll see how it goes. You've got it. You have to help the change management piece along the way for these things to be effective. The other big one, if you've got a limited budget, don't peanut butter it out so thin that it's ineffective. I talked earlier about sort of asking people to do a lot for a little bit. I've seen some programs where people say, "Hey, managers, you have $5 a month for your whole department store, $10 a month for a department store." That's actually the number, was 10. And I was like, "You've got a whole store. That's just the manager's not going to do it. It's a waste of their time." And so if you've got limited resources, don't spread it too thin, and rather you be more impactful in a region and then make the business case for the next region than to be I've got to launch it everywhere and everyone gets a half of a cookie. It just does not make sense. And the last one I'd say, for just as HR leaders, so I think a lot of the team people here are HR leaders, is please don't overpromise on the stats that you're going to deliver for the company. That's that a year later after the program's launched, a lot of times I'm hearing people going back and forth about, I promised them 80% participation and 100% budget utilization, and I've never seen either of those two numbers. And so don't overpromise what you can do, but make a solid, honest, this is what we're going to do, and go do it, right? But those are sort of the three things I see most often from launching these programs.
Great advice. And I honestly, I'm so glad to see the chat alive. I wish I had time to keep up with the chat because you guys are dropping a lot of wisdom too. But it's going to be interesting to go back and now my favorite thing to do, Tracy, is use ChatGPT to analyze it, pull out the takeaways,
Yeah.
which I put into the takeaways doc. But this is the famous networking minute. If you want to connect with other folks here, drop your LinkedIn URL in here. Obviously, everybody here is interested in this topic, and I would suggest connecting with maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 people on the chat, and maybe they're at a similar size organization or similar geography or industry or whatever, and just say hey, why were you on that? And are you looking to roll something out? Have you already rolled something out? Just kind of support each other, help each other, abundance mindset. I think, somebody literally yesterday was telling me they got a job from one of these that we did 6 weeks ago. It's good to grow your network, never a bad thing. And it's also just great to kind of share your experience and commiserate with somebody else who's maybe going through a similar sort of thing. Um, and while we're doing this, we'll launch a quick feedback poll as well to just sort of get better. We do these webinars quite frequently now, and we just want to have a compelling product for everybody so that our community can continue to learn. It's awesome to see kind of a lot of the same some familiar names on this, and that probably means we're doing a good job. But we always want to keep getting better and better. So we will with that jump into some Q&A that we got here from when everybody signed up. And we have a lot of questions. We're not going to get to every question, but we will try our best here. So the first question, and I'll just throw this up to you guys, jump ball, whoever wants to take it, or both of y'all can weigh in on any of these. And I'm just going to read these. How to help caregivers who work in client homes that you never or very rarely see in person. We do gift cards, calls, employee of the month, etc., but would love more ideas.
Can you go with them? Is that possible to go on some client visits with the caregivers? I think that that's super impactful. I spent a lot of time in our physical locations, and unless that's a health or safety issue, I would do that pretty regularly because you can ask them what they need. But if you see what they need and you see the impact of the stress of what that role takes on them, I think that's going to allow you to better understand what you might need to do.
One thing that our mayor here in Boston, Michelle Wu, does that I think is kind of cool is she commutes with people a couple times a week. And like, a lot of these commutes, the Boston, we got the oldest subway in the country. They're not fun. And she puts it on her Instagram. And so you could go there and just sort of understand it, but also sharing the journey, right? I think is kind of interesting as well through a
There's
mass communication channel. Chrissy, what do you
nothing
think about
better
that?
as an HR leader that you could do. Like, it was the highest and best use of my time, just putting on jeans and going sitting at a wholesale counter and listening to the customers and listening to our people and just spending time with them. That also builds trust faster than just about anything you could do.
Just one little add-on. If you can find a way to allow the people who your caregivers are servicing to give recognition to them or to thank them or to collect that, that'd be a good way as well. So because often they see the good work they're doing, even though you may not be there to see it as the leaders or the company.
How do you establish and run a successful recognition program when companies are in a cost-conscious environment? Because you talked about starting small. Obviously, that's something there. I don't know if there are any kind of hacky ways of doing this, maybe that are free or cheap to kind of get the ball rolling.
So I've been in a couple like epic cutting situations, being at BlackBerry from its largest to its smallest, and so I think for me here, you're gonna have to be a bit innovative or a bit not innovative, a bit nimble in terms of what your culture will allow. And so during that time, there's a bit of a balance between things that will be perceived as wrong time, wrong place, as well as some things that the culture will allow to continue to happen. But I would say you've got to find a way to make the people who stay at the company be locked in and be happy to be there. We treat often those cost-cutting situations like people are surviving through that situation, as opposed to you need them to thrive to get through the situation. So often you can find ways to either steal budget or remove budget from other places to make sure you're still making people feel recognized while they are taking on extra work and extra hours to get through that cost-cutting time.
Or you do things, and ideally you're spending money on a recognition program, but a thank you is free.
Yeah.
And so if you embed that into the culture and just genuinely thank people for the work that they're doing. My old CEO used to talk about this. The goodwill that you build during the good times carries you through the bad times. So if you lead with trust and you recognize people and you thank them for doing the work, that's going to carry you through those lean times. And there will be lean times in any business. And I think the other thing is like you may not be able to give money, but maybe you can give time. So that gift of time, whether it's giving somebody an hour or coming in late or letting them off once a week to go to their kid's game, there's something that you can do that costs little to nothing.
Totally agree. I just want to like amen a lot of the things you just said. Fantastic.
When you first roll these out, how do you motivate specifically peer-to-peer recognition?
I'm a big fan of a couple of things. I think that when you roll programs out, if you can do more recognition coming from the company or leadership in the peer-to-peer sense, often that does help. And I've been really, really seeing good results when people are doing sort of like gamification or like drawing some of those things out and calling them up. And so whether you're just drawing them out and calling them out in larger forums or emails or newsletters, whatever you're doing to draw them out, great. If you can put some monetary behind pulling some of them out and recognizing a couple of them from non-monetary to monetary, great. But peer-to-peer requires an investment in nurturing it, and so I think you can't do too much.
I think every organization has these culture champions or has these folks that are super, super engaged, right? And so I think you tap into them. This is one of the times when you tap into them and get them to be early adopters of the program. And if people see them adopting that peer-to-peer recognition, that's going to catch on. So it's like anything, you watch somebody else do it. Nobody's going to do anything for a while. You watch somebody else do it, and then it becomes a little bit more comfortable.
Okay, public recognition, Tracy's favorite thing. If you're going to do it, is it better to recognize somebody in front of a crowd or through email, like a blast email?
It's better to ask.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
better to ask. Like that's the answer that no one will like, but it is better to
Right.
ask. Both have their positives, both have their drawbacks. I think if you don't ask, you will risk tripping over either one, right?
Yeah, because some people are not me and some people prefer, I would love an email, but some people would prefer walking into a room full of people with your boss when you tried to back out. That also happened to me. Like, no, you've got to come. I don't want to. Your parents are here. Like, well, I still don't want to do it. So, yeah, that's a tough situation.
How do you avoid any resentment that might pile up on folks that are getting recognized more?
That's a good question. So it could be resentment or it could be fuel. And so I think if it's done honestly and if it's done, you know, peer-to-peer recognition, I think that's can be where you can see some outsized response to maybe somebody who's really popular within the group or people get together and decide to recognize. So I think you have to monitor that. But I think if it's honest and if it's genuine and if it's really truly recognizing someone for something, then it can be somewhat of a motivator. But I think there are some downsides.
Yeah, I think this happens less and less the more we do more recognition. This outlier of it's one person all the time. I'm not a super fan of the hero recognition where it's like employee of the month. Like there's one award that we're all striving for, and which makes there's 12 for the year out of our 2,000 employees. Not a super fan of those type of like how those ratios work. But if we're going to worry about the balances, I really like making sure people understand why they're being recognized. I think that's important because that helps other people understand what they're doing and where they can also improve or strive for. When people understand why the recognition is happening, not just here's Bob's award, here's Bob's award. It's like they need to understand why Bob's getting awarded.
Couple of just kind of house cleaning things here because we're running up against time, and I wanted to call out a couple of amazing webinars that we have coming up on optimizing the candidate experience. So kind of a lot of the same themes, but more from a talent acquisition perspective, as well as one that we have with one of the lead partners at K&L Gates, which is like the law firm that Bill Gates's dad, I think, started. It's like one of the larger firms in the country. And he's just a DEI expert. And we're going to talk about, from a legal perspective, some of the Trump executive orders, kind of what companies are facing with from a risk perspective and how to successfully navigate that, which should be pretty interesting. And again, we're doing these webinars on a regular basis. Thank you so much for everybody who continues to support us, join us, build our community. We love it. I will just put in one more link for our advisor service. If anybody wants to take advantage of that, you're buying software or somebody in your network is, and they need help. We love helping companies. We got a 4.9 star rating. It's free and it's a low cost from a time perspective as well. It actually saves a lot of time. With all that said, I want to thank both of you guys for an amazing hour. Thanks for spending time with us, sharing your insights from the trenches, from managing especially these frontline workforces, which are I think more difficult to engage in one of these recognition programs, whether that's manager or peer-to-peer, et cetera. Sharing, how do we get these things going? How do we get the C-suite to get involved? How do we do it in a cost-conscious way, an inclusive way for ESL, for people that are not tech savvy? There's just been like a lot of insights, and we really appreciate that. And I also appreciate everybody in the comments for sharing their advice, for asking questions. And again, this was another, for better or worse, another conversation where I'm sort of like so engaged that it's hard to keep up with the chat. But we will analyze the chat. We'll pull it out. We're going to send a takeaways doc, so we'll pull out some of those as well. And thank you for everybody who contributes to this. And of course, our team that sets all these up and does all the actual work on the back end. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're going to next. And hopefully we'll see you again for another session soon.
Thank you, Phil. Always fun.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks, Tracy.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
Tracy. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining. Bye.